He caught Sophia pocketing something from the donation bin. Security was coming, until he saw what she pulled out her own coat, donated that morning, when a shivering intern arrived without one. His finger hovered over the call button, then dropped. Before I continue the story, please subscribe. I need to reach 1,000 subscribers so I can keep bringing you stories like this every day. It's just one click for you, but it means a lot to me. Thank you. Marcus Hartwell sat alone in his 52nd floor office at 11 in the evening, the glow of multiple security monitors casting pale light across his face as he performed his nightly ritual of watching others live while he merely existed. The office around him was immaculate and expensive, all glass and polished mahogany and artwork that cost more than most people earned in a decade. Yet it held all the warmth of a museum after closing. He had not left this building before midnight in 7 months. His penthouse across the city sat empty and silent, a mausoleum of memories he could not bear to face. And so he stayed here among the security feeds and the hum of climate control systems, telling himself he was working when really he was hiding. His finger hovered over the call button for building security as he watched the woman on screen 3. The night janitor, whose name he had never bothered to learn, approached the donation bin in the lobby. The bin was filled with coats for the company winter charity drive, and he watched her reach inside and pull something out, and his first thought was that he had finally found what he always expected to find when he watched these feeds late at night. Proof that people were exactly as selfish and disappointing as he had come to believe. But then he recognized the coat. It was thin and gray with frayed cuffs at the sleeves, and he had seen it just that morning on this same woman as she finished her shift and passed through the lobby. At the precise moment, a young intern stumbled through the front doors, shivering and soaked from the freezing rain, wearing nothing but a blazer. He had watched on this same monitor as the janitor removed her own coat without a word and draped it over the young woman's shoulders, and he had watched the intern try to refuse, and the janitor insist with a gentle shake of her head. And then he had watched the janitor walk out into the bitter cold morning, wearing nothing but her thin uniform shirt. And now here she was 12 hours later, retrieving that same coat from the donation bin because she had nothing else to wear home. Marcus removed his finger from the security call button. He replayed the footage. He watched it again and then once more, searching for something he might have missed, some angle that would reveal this act to be less than it appeared, because surely no one simply gave away their only coat to a stranger and expected nothing in return. But there was no hidden angle. There was only a woman pulling her threadbare coat from a bin and slipping it over her shoulders and walking out into another freezing night. He leaned back in his chair and something shifted in his chest, something that felt like a crack forming in stone. When was the last time he had sacrificed anything for anyone? When was the last time he had given something that cost him? He could write a check for $100,000 and not feel it. And he did write such checks regularly, to charities and foundations and galas where his name would appear in the program, but when had he last given something that left him cold? He heard his late wife Catherine's voice then, as clearly as if she were standing beside him. The measure of a person is what they give when they have nothing left. She used to say that. She used to believe it with her whole heart, and she used to make him believe it too, and then she died and took that belief with her and left him with nothing but money and silence. He looked at the monitors and watched the janitor disappear into the night. And he did not call security, and he did not go home. He sat in his cold, expensive office and felt something stir that he had thought was dead. Over the following nights, Marcus found himself arriving at the office earlier and staying later, and he told himself it was because of the quarterly reports and the Asian market expansion and a dozen other lies that sounded plausible in his own head. But the truth was simpler and stranger. He was watching her, not with suspicion anymore, not with the expectation of catching her in some petty theft, but with something closer to fascination. He learned from her employee file that her name was Sophia Reyes and that she had worked the night shift for 2 years without missing a single day, and that her emergency contact was listed as the Children's Cardiac Unit at St. Christopher's Hospital. He did not know what that meant, but he felt the weight of it. He watched her on the monitors as she found a wallet dropped behind a lobby planter, and he waited for her to pocket the cash inside, and instead watched her spend 20 minutes tracking down the owner through the building directory, so she could return it intact. He watched her stay an extra hour one night to help George, the elderly security guard, clean up a coffee spill because his hands were shaking too badly to manage it alone. And she never once made him feel small for needing help. He watched her tape a small handwritten note inside a bathroom stall on the 14th floor, and he sent a maintenance worker to retrieve it, and it said only this: "You are stronger than you know, and tomorrow is a new day." He watched her eat nothing but crackers from the vending machine for dinner 3 nights in a row because she kept giving her sandwich away to the homeless man who slept in the alley behind the loading dock. Each small act was nothing by itself. A returned wallet, a cleaned spill, a kind word taped to a wall. But together they formed a portrait of someone who moved through the world with a grace he had forgotten existed. Then one night he watched her answer her phone in the basement hallway, and he saw her face collapse. There was no sound on the security feeds, but he did not need sound to recognize devastation. She leaned against the wall and pressed her hand to her mouth, and her whole body seemed to fold in on itself. And then she reached into the pocket of her uniform and pulled out a small object and held it tight. He zoomed the camera and saw it was a tiny heart made of folded paper, and she clutched it like a lifeline as tears ran down her face. The next day she asked Mrs. Chen, the head of janitorial staff, for extra shifts. Any shifts at all, any building, any hour. He pulled her file again and stared at that emergency contact and began to understand. He added her name to the holiday bonus list that week. Janitors were never on the list. When his building manager, Richard, questioned it, Marcus said only that he was reviewing employee recognition protocols, and Richard nodded and made a note and did not question further because one did not question Marcus Hartwell. But Marcus questioned himself. What was he doing? What did he hope to accomplish? He could not answer except to say that for the first time in 2 years he felt something when he woke in the morning, a sense of purpose or at least curiosity, a reason to arrive at the building that had nothing to do with profit margins and everything to do with a woman who gave away her coat in winter. On a cold Thursday night in early December, Marcus took the elevator down to the lobby at 11:30, which he never did, and walked toward the front doors as if he had forgotten something, which he had not. He was wearing slacks and a simple sweater instead of his usual suit, and he had left his Rolex in his desk drawer, and he looked for all the world like a middle manager working late on a deadline rather than the man whose name was etched in brass above the entrance. Sophia was there as he knew she would be, running a polishing machine over the marble floors. And she did not look up as he approached because she had learned that people in this building did not see janitors. He stopped near the reception desk and pretended to search for something. And finally she glanced his way, and he said hello, and she nodded politely and said good evening. He told her his name was Marcus and that he worked on the 35th floor and often stayed late, and she said that was a lot of hours. And he said yes, it was. She was guarded, and he understood why. He was a stranger to her, and she had no reason to trust strangers, especially ones who roamed empty lobbies close to midnight. But he noticed things about her now that the cameras could not capture. The careful way she moved, conserving energy, the frayed cuffs of her coat which she had retrieved from the donation bin and still wore because she had nothing else, the quiet dignity in how she held herself despite everything, and pinned to her cleaning cart beside a bottle of disinfectant was a small paper heart, folded with care, its edges soft from handling. He asked about it before he could stop himself. "That little heart on your cart," he said. "I see it every time I pass through, and I have always wondered about it." Her face changed. The guardedness softened, and something almost like light came into her eyes. "My daughter makes them," she said. "She is 7, and she makes dozens of them every week. She calls them wish hearts." He asked what a wish heart was. Sophia smiled, and it was the first time he had seen her smile, and something in his chest responded to it. "My daughter believes that if you fold enough paper hearts and give them away to people who need them, the wishes come true. She says the secret is you cannot keep them for yourself. You have to let them go. Marcus thought of Catherine then. His wife had said something similar once, something about hope being a thing you had to release before it could return to you. He had not thought of those words in 2 years. He had not let himself think of them, because thinking of Catherine meant feeling her absence. And feeling her absence meant drowning. But standing in this empty lobby with this woman who gave away her coat and her sandwiches and her daughter's paper hearts, he felt those words return to him like a song he had forgotten he knew. That is a beautiful belief, he said, and he meant it. She needs beautiful beliefs right now, she said. And she did not explain further, and he did not ask. The moment passed and she wished him good night and returned to her work, and he stood in the middle of the polished marble lobby and watched her push the cleaning cart toward the elevators. He had everything a person could want. He had buildings and accounts and a name that opened doors across 6 continents. But watching Sophia Reyes walk away with her frayed coat and her daughter's wish heart pinned to her cart, he understood with sudden and terrible clarity that he had nothing at all. Nothing that mattered. Nothing that lasted. Nothing that a 7-year-old girl would fold into a paper heart and give to a stranger in need. He returned to his office on the 52nd floor and sat in the darkness for a long time and did not watch the security monitors. He thought about coats given away in winter and wishes released into the world and the measure of a person being what they give when they have nothing left. And he thought about Sophia Reyes and her daughter and the emergency contact at the children's cardiac unit and the way her face had crumpled during that phone call in the basement hallway. He did not know her story yet. He did not know the weight she carried or the prayers she whispered or the fear that kept her working double shifts on no sleep. But he knew he wanted to understand. He knew that something in him had woken up, something that had been asleep or dead since Catherine's funeral, and he knew that this woman with the paper hearts had woken it without trying and without knowing. He reached into his pocket and realized his hand was searching for something that was not there. Some small token to hold on to, and he understood then how much he had lost and how far he had drifted from everything that once made him human. The office was silent. The city glittered below him, vast and indifferent. And somewhere out in the cold night, a janitor was making her way home to a daughter who folded wishes into paper hearts, and Marcus Hartwell sat alone with his fortune and his emptiness, and made a decision he could not yet name, but felt in his bones like the first crack of ice before a thaw. Sophia Reyes unlocked the door to her apartment at 6:43 in the morning, her body aching from 8 hours of pushing cleaning carts and scrubbing floors and polishing marble until it gleamed for people who would never know her name. The apartment was small and sat on the 4th floor of a building with no elevator, and the hallway always smelled of other people's cooking, and the radiator clanked through the night, but it was theirs, and it was clean, and it was home. She set her bag down quietly and moved through the dim living room to the bedroom she shared with her daughter. And there was Lily asleep in the twin bed by the window, her dark hair spread across the pillow, and her small hand resting on a cardboard box filled with paper hearts she had folded that week. Beside the box sat a photograph of Miguel in a wooden frame, and Lily had placed one of her origami hearts against it, as if to keep her father company through the night. Sophia stood in the doorway and watched her daughter breathe and felt the familiar mixture of love and terror that had defined her existence for 3 years. The doctors said Lily's heart was failing. The accident that killed Miguel had damaged their daughter in ways that did not show themselves immediately, and now the clock was running out, and the surgery that could save her cost $200,000, and insurance would cover only $40,000. And Sophia had been saving every penny for 2 years, and she had $23,000 in an envelope taped behind the refrigerator, and it was not enough, and it would never be enough. And the doctor had looked at her last week with kind eyes and said, 3 months at most. We cannot wait longer than that. She walked to the kitchen and looked at the medical bills arranged on the counter in a neat stack, because she could not afford to pay them, but she could at least organize them. And she thought about the websites people had told her about, the crowdfunding pages where you told your story and strangers sent money, and she felt something in her recoil. We do not beg, she told herself. We work. Miguel had said that. Her mother had said that. It was the code she lived by, the dignity she clung to when everything else was falling away. She opened the refrigerator and took out the bread and the small container of strawberries she had bought on sale. And she began making Lily's lunch for school, cutting the sandwich into triangles the way her daughter liked, and arranging the strawberries in a pattern, and tucking a napkin with a drawn heart into the bag. And she did not make lunch for herself because there was only enough bread for Lily, and that was fine. She would eat crackers at work. She always did. Lily appeared in the kitchen doorway, rubbing her eyes. And she looked at her mother and said, "Mama, why do you cry at night? I hear you sometimes." And Sophia felt her heart seize, but she smiled and knelt down and said, "Those are happy tears, mija. Sometimes when you love someone so much, it spills out of your eyes." Lily nodded solemnly and said, "I love you that much too." And Sophia held her daughter and breathed in the scent of her hair, and thought. Across the city, Marcus Hartwell returned to his penthouse as the sun rose over the harbor, and he stood in the living room that had once been filled with Catherine's laughter and was now silent as a tomb. He had not slept. He had sat in his office all night thinking about Sophia Reyes and her paper hearts and the emergency contact at the children's hospital. And now he was home, and the emptiness pressed against him like a physical weight. He walked through the rooms and saw Catherine everywhere and nowhere. Her books still lined the shelves. Her garden on the terrace had died months ago because he could not bear to tend it. And on the wall of the hallway that led to their bedroom hung her portrait, a photograph from their wedding day, and he had turned it to face the wall 6 months after she passed, because looking at it was like pressing on a wound that would not heal. But this morning he stopped in front of it. He reached out and turned it back around and made himself look at her face, her smile, the light in her eyes that had made him believe he could be more than what his father had raised him to be. Catherine had volunteered at hospitals every week. She sat with dying patients and held their hands and read to children in oncology wards, and she did it all anonymously, refusing to let the family name be attached to any of it, because she said that kindness with a name tag was just advertising. She believed in grace, and she believed in service, and she believed that wealth was not what you had, but what you gave away. And Marcus had believed those things too when she was alive, or at least he had tried to. And then she died, and he stopped trying, and he buried himself in work and wrote checks to charities and told himself that was enough. But it was not enough. He knew that now. Sophia Reyes, with her frayed coat, had shown him what enough looked like, and it looked nothing like a check with his signature on it. He sat down at his desk and opened his laptop, and before he understood what he was doing, he had typed Sophia's name into a search, looking for her address, looking for information about her daughter, looking for some way to help that did not require him to reveal himself. And then he stopped. His hands hovered over the keyboard, and he felt a wave of shame roll through him. What was he doing? This woman had been honest with him from the first moment, had shared pieces of her life without pretense or manipulation, and here he was invading her privacy, treating her like a problem to be solved rather than a person to be respected. He closed the laptop and sat back and thought about what Catherine would say if she could see him now. She would say that helping someone was not about your comfort. It was about their dignity. She would say that if you wanted to truly see a person, you had to let them show themselves to you, not go searching through databases and records like they were a case file. He left the laptop closed and went to the window and watched the city wake up and made a decision. He would wait. He would let Sophia tell him what she needed, if she ever chose to. And in the meantime, he would simply be present, simply be a person who saw her. Because she had told him that most people looked right through her, and he understood now what a gift it was to be seen. Over the following weeks, Marcus found reasons to be in the lobby almost every night. He told himself he was reviewing operations. He told Richard he was concerned about security protocols, but the truth was simpler, and he had stopped lying to himself about it. He wanted to talk to Sophia. He wanted to understand the world she moved through, so different from his own, and yet so much more alive. Their conversations grew longer. She told him about Miguel, how they had met at a church festival when she was 19, and he had asked her to dance, and she had said no 3 times before she finally said yes, because he made her laugh. And no one had made her laugh in years. She told him about the accident, the drunk driver who ran a red light and struck their car on Miguel's side, and how Miguel had seen it coming in the last second and thrown his body across Lily's car seat and taken the impact that would have killed their daughter. She told him that Lily had survived because her father loved her enough to die for her, and she told him that she survived now because Lily needed her to. Her voice did not waver when she said these things. She spoke with a quiet ferocity that Marcus recognized as the only alternative to breaking down entirely. He shared pieces of himself in return, though not the whole truth. He told her that he had lost his wife to illness 2 years ago, and that he worked late because his home was too quiet, and he did not know how to fill the silence. He told her that he had forgotten how to talk to people, really talk, and that these conversations in the empty lobby were the first real ones he had in longer than he could remember. He did not tell her that he owned the building. He did not tell her that his name was on the door. He told himself this was to protect her dignity, to keep her from feeling small. But part of him knew it was also to protect these moments, this fragile connection that felt like the first green shoot after a long winter. One night, Sophia reached into her pocket and pulled out a small origami heart and held it out to him. "Lily made extras this week," she said. "She wanted me to give one to someone who needed it. I think maybe you need it." Marcus took the paper heart, and it weighed almost nothing, and yet it felt heavier than anything he had held in years. He thought of all the gifts he had received in his life, the watches and the cars and the bottles of wine that cost more than Sophia earned in a month, and none of them had moved him like this small folded piece of paper from a 7-year-old girl he had never met. He put it in his pocket and said thank you, and Sophia nodded, and there was something in her eyes that looked like recognition, as if she saw the weight of what she had given him and understood it perfectly. That night, after she left, he sat in the lobby for a long time holding the paper heart and realized that he had been holding his breath for 2 years, waiting for something without knowing what it was. And now he understood. He had been waiting for permission to feel again. Richard appeared in Marcus's office the following Monday with news about the annual charity gala. The event was scheduled for the second Saturday of December. Black tie, 400 donors, a silent auction that would raise approximately $2 million for the company's charitable foundation. Richard reviewed the logistics and the catering and the guest list, and then mentioned almost as an afterthought that janitorial staff would be working the event at triple overtime, but would be instructed to remain invisible, to stay in service corridors and avoid the main ballroom, because donors did not want to see cleaning staff while they were writing large checks. Marcus felt something tighten in his chest. Sophia would be there. She would work the event for triple pay because she needed every dollar for her daughter's surgery. And she would move through the shadows of a party held in his name, and she would see him there in his tuxedo, surrounded by people who wrote checks to feel better about themselves, and she would know that he had been lying to her from the beginning. He had to tell her. He understood that now. But he also understood what would happen when he did. He would lose her. Not in a romantic sense. He did not presume to think of her that way. But he would lose this connection, this friendship, this sense of being seen by someone who wanted nothing from him. And more than that, he feared what the truth would do to her. She had told him that most people in the building looked through her, and now she would learn that the one person who had seen her was also the one person who had the power to render her completely invisible. He tried to find other ways to help. He arranged for her to win an employee lottery that did not exist, a prize of $5,000 for outstanding service. And he made sure the announcement came from Human Resources with no connection to his name. When Sophia received the news, he watched her face on the security monitor and saw suspicion rather than joy. Janitors did not win awards. Janitors did not receive recognition. She knew something was wrong, and her dignity would not allow her to accept grace she had not earned. But Mrs. Chen, the head of janitorial staff, took her aside and told her not to question it. "Sometimes good things happen," Mrs. Chen said. "Sometimes the universe remembers you exist. Do not throw it back. Take it and use it for your daughter." So Sophia took it. She used the money for Lily's preliminary tests, the imaging and the blood work, and the consultations that would prepare her for a surgery they still could not afford, and the $5,000 bought them one more month of hope. The night before the gala, Sophia found Marcus in the lobby, and she walked up to him with an expression he had not seen before, something open and almost tender. She said, "I want to thank you for being kind to me. I know that probably seems like a small thing to you, but it is not small to me. Most people in this building look through me like I am part of the furniture. You actually see me." Marcus felt the words like a blade slipping between his ribs. He had to tell her. He opened his mouth to speak, and at that moment Richard appeared from the elevator bank and called out, "Good evening, Mr. Hartwell. I have the final head count for tomorrow's gala." And Marcus watched Sophia's face change. Confusion first, then understanding, then something that looked like a door closing. "You are Mr. Hartwell," she said. Her voice was flat and careful. "You own this building. You own everything." He tried to explain. He said he had not meant to deceive her. He said he had only wanted to talk to her without the weight of his name between them. He said he had been afraid that if she knew who he was, she would not have spoken to him honestly. But even as the words came out, he heard how hollow they sounded, how much they centered his own fears and his own comfort, rather than her right to know who she was talking to. Sophia stepped back from him, and he saw her dignity harden into armor, saw the walls come up that she had slowly been letting down over these weeks. "I am not a charity case," she said. "I am not your project. I am not here to make you feel better about your money or your empty life." And she turned and walked away with her cleaning cart and her frayed coat and the paper heart pinned beside the bottle of disinfectant, and Marcus stood in the lobby of the building that bore his name and could not find a single word to stop her. Sophia returned the $5,000 to Human Resources the next morning. She walked into the office before her shift ended and placed the check on the desk and told the woman behind the counter that there had been a mistake, that janitors did not win employee recognition awards, and that she could not accept money she had not earned. The woman tried to explain that the award was legitimate, that Sophia's name had been drawn from a pool of eligible employees. But Sophia shook her head and said, "Please, I am asking you to take it back," and something in her voice made the woman stop arguing and accept the check and make a note in the file. Sophia walked out of the office and felt her dignity return to her like armor clicking into place. And she also felt the weight of what that dignity had cost her. $5,000. One more month of stability for Lily. Gone because she could not accept charity from a man who had lied to her face for weeks while pretending to be her friend. She changed her routes through the building after that. She learned Marcus Hartwell's patterns, the floors he visited, the times he passed through the lobby, and she made sure she was never there when he was. She took the service elevator instead of the main one. She cleaned the executive floors only when she knew he was in meetings. She became a ghost in the building he owned, invisible by choice now rather than by circumstance, and if there was something painful about that, she did not let herself feel it. She worked triple shifts to make up for the money she had returned. 4 hours of sleep became 3, then 2, then sometimes none at all. She ate less so Lily could eat more. She sold the small television in their apartment and the winter boots she had been saving for and the necklace Miguel had given her on their first anniversary. And it still was not enough. It would never be enough, but she would not stop working because work was the only thing she could control. Marcus tried to reach her. He wrote a letter explaining everything. Explaining that he had not meant to deceive her, that he had only wanted to know what it felt like to be seen as a person instead of a name on a building, and he left it for her with Mrs. Chen. Sophia returned it, unopened. He tried again the following week with another letter, this one shorter. Just 3 lines asking if they could speak, and she returned that one too with the seal unbroken. He stood in his office and looked at the returned envelopes and understood finally what he had done. He had told himself that hiding his identity was about protecting her dignity, but that was a lie. It was about protecting himself. It was about control. He had wanted the connection without the risk. the friendship without the vulnerability of being fully known, and in doing so he had treated her not as an equal, but as someone to be managed. He had done exactly what he accused the donors at his galas of doing. He had tried to buy his way into feeling like a good person without actually becoming one. That night he stood in front of Catherine's portrait and spoke to her the way he sometimes did when the silence became too heavy. "I found something real," he said. "For the first time since you left, I found something that made me feel like myself again. And I have already lost it." The portrait did not answer, of course, but he could imagine what Catherine would say. She would say that lost things could sometimes be found again. She would say that the measure of a person was not in avoiding mistakes, but in what they did after making them. She would say that if he truly cared about Sophia, he would find a way to help her that honored who she was rather than who he wanted to be. On a Tuesday afternoon, 2 weeks before the gala, Sophia was mopping the hallway on the 31st floor when her phone rang and she saw the number and her heart stopped. It was Lily's school. Her daughter had collapsed on the playground during recess, and the paramedics were taking her to St. Christopher's Hospital, and Sophia needed to come right away. She dropped the mop and ran. She did not wait for the elevator. She took the stairs, 31 floors down with her lungs burning and her legs shaking, and she burst out of the stairwell and through the lobby and onto the street, and she did not stop running until she reached the hospital 6 blocks away. Lily was in the emergency room, small and pale in a bed too big for her, and Dr. Amara Hassan was waiting for Sophia with a look on her face that Sophia had seen before and had prayed she would never see again. The doctor explained that Lily's heart was failing faster than they had anticipated. The surgery could not wait 3 months. It could not wait 3 weeks. It had to happen within 21 days or the window would close and Lily would need a transplant instead. And the transplant list was long, and Lily's blood type was rare, and the doctor did not finish the sentence, but Sophia understood what she was not saying. Without the surgery, her daughter would die. Sophia sat beside Lily's bed and held her daughter's hand and watched her sleep and felt the world collapse into a single point of unbearable focus. She had $23,000 saved, and she needed $160,000 more. And there were not enough shifts in the world, not enough hours she could work or things she could sell or prayers she could whisper into the dark. She had promised Miguel she would protect their daughter, and she was failing, and there was nothing she could do. The night of the Hartwell Industries Gala arrived, and Sophia reported for duty because she needed the triple overtime pay. Every dollar of it. Even though it would not be enough. The ballroom was transformed into a palace of light and luxury, chandeliers cascading crystal from the ceiling, and tables draped in white linen and centerpieces of roses that cost more than her weekly salary. 400 donors filled the room in their tuxedos and gowns, diamonds glittering at throats and wrists, and they held champagne flutes and laughed and wrote checks, and felt good about themselves for one evening. Sophia moved through them like a shadow. She collected empty glasses and replaced soiled napkins and wiped up spills, and none of them saw her. None of them looked at her face or wondered about her life or noticed the redness around her eyes from crying. She was part of the furniture, exactly as the building manager had instructed. Invisible and silent and efficient. Then Marcus took the stage. He stood at the podium in his perfectly tailored tuxedo and looked out at the crowd and gave a speech about corporate responsibility and giving back and the importance of community, and Sophia stood by the kitchen door holding a tray of empty glasses and listened to every word and felt something bitter rise in her throat. These people would donate $2 million tonight, and they would not see the woman whose daughter was dying. They would not know that the janitor who cleaned up after them was working herself to death for money that would never be enough. They would write their checks and feel virtuous and go home to their beautiful houses and their healthy children and their lives of ease, and she would go home to a stack of medical bills and a countdown clock and a little girl who folded paper hearts because she believed wishes could come true. The speech ended, and the crowd applauded, and Sophia turned to carry her tray to the kitchen, and she felt a hand on her arm. She turned, and Marcus was there, having left the stage and crossed the ballroom to find her, and his face was raw with something she did not want to see because she did not have room for his guilt or his apologies or his need to be forgiven. She pulled her arm away and walked toward the service corridor, and he followed her. In the quiet hallway behind the ballroom, away from the glittering crowd, he finally spoke the truth. He said, "I was not trying to deceive you. I was trying to feel something real." He said, "You are the first person in 2 years who saw me instead of my money, who talked to me like I was a human being instead of a checkbook, and I did not want to lose that." He said, "I know I do not deserve your forgiveness, but please let me help your daughter. Not as charity, not as some rich man trying to buy his way into heaven, but as penance for the harm I have done you." Sophia felt rage flare in her chest, and she turned on him and said, "You think you can buy redemption. That is what your world does. Throw money at guilt and call it generosity. You people write checks so you can sleep at night, and you think that makes you good, but it does not make you good. It makes you comfortable, and those are not the same thing." But even as she said the words, she felt something cracking inside her. The armor she had worn for so long finally giving way under a weight it was never meant to carry. "My daughter is dying," she said, and her voice broke. "She is 7 years old, and her heart is failing, and I cannot save her. I have worked every hour I have. I have sold everything I own. I have not eaten a full meal in 3 weeks. And it is not enough. It will never be enough. And I do not know what to do." She pressed her hand against the wall to steady herself, and the tears came. The first tears she had allowed herself to cry in front of another person since the night Miguel died, and she hated herself for this weakness, and she hated Marcus for witnessing it, and she could not stop. Marcus stood before her and did not reach for her and did not speak empty words of comfort. Instead, he removed his tuxedo jacket and draped it over a chair and rolled up his sleeves and said, "Then let me work beside you, not above you, beside you. Tell me what to do." She looked at him and did not understand. He said, "I am going to finish your shift with you tonight. I am going to push the cart and scrub the floors and haul the trash. And you are going to show me how, because I have never done any of it, and I need you to teach me. And tomorrow we are going to figure out how to save your daughter together. Not my way, but your way. Not charity, but partnership." Sophia stared at him and waited for the catch, the angle, the moment when this would reveal itself as another form of control or condescension. But Marcus just stood there in his dress shirt, with his sleeves rolled up and his expensive watch still on his wrist, and his face open and uncertain. And she realized he was not trying to save her. He was trying to understand her. She took him to the supply closet and handed him a mop and showed him how to fill the bucket and mix the solution and work in sections so the floor dried evenly. He was clumsy and slow, and the other janitors stared at him with suspicion and confusion. "And Mrs." Chen watched from down the hallway with her arms crossed and her eyes narrowed, waiting to see if this was performance or something else. They worked for 5 hours. They emptied trash cans and scrubbed toilets and vacuumed carpets and polished brass fixtures in the elevators. Marcus's hands blistered, and his back ached, and his shirt soaked through with sweat, and he did not complain, and he did not stop, and he did not make a single comment about how hard the work was or how much he was sacrificing. By 3 in the morning the building was empty, and they sat on a bench in the lobby. Both of them exhausted, and Sophia finally asked him why. Why any of this? Why the conversations in the lobby and the hidden identity and the letters, and now this? Marcus was quiet for a long moment and then told her about Catherine. He told her that his wife had spent years volunteering at hospices and hospitals, sitting with dying patients and reading to sick children, and that she did it all anonymously because she believed that kindness with a name attached was just advertising. He told her that Catherine thought wealth was not a blessing but a responsibility, that it was a test of whether you could see people who had less than you as fully human. He told her that when Catherine died, he forgot everything she taught him and retreated into his money like a fortress, writing checks to charities so he could tell himself he was still good, and that he had been dead inside for 2 years until the night he saw Sophia give her coat to a stranger and walk into the cold. "The difference between us," he said, "is that I have spent 2 years trying to buy my way into feeling like a good person. You gave your only coat to someone who needed it and never told anyone. That is not the same thing. That is not even close." Sophia sat with his words and felt something shift inside her, some wall coming down, that she had not even known she had built. She said, "I am not afraid of being poor. I have been poor my whole life, and I know how to survive it. I am afraid of failing my daughter. I promised her father I would protect her, and I cannot do it, and I do not know what kind of mother cannot save her own child." Marcus turned to her and said, "The kind who donates her coat in winter, the kind who gives away her lunch to strangers, the kind who works until she collapses and never complains and never stops. Lily knows she is loved. She knows her mother would do anything for her. That is not failure. That is the opposite of failure." They sat in silence, and the city outside the windows began to lighten toward dawn. And Sophia made a decision that terrified her because it required her to release the only thing she had left: her pride. She said, "If we do this, we do it my way. I tell my story. I ask for help with my own voice. I do not hide, and I do not pretend, and I do not let you make me into a symbol of your redemption. I am a person, and my daughter is a person, and we are not your project." Marcus nodded and said, "Then we build a campaign around your story. A benefit auction using my connections. Corporate matching from Hartwell Industries. A real effort, with your voice at the center of it and your name on every piece of it. You tell people what you need, and you let them decide if they want to help. No deception, no manipulation, just the truth." Sophia looked at him and saw not a billionaire playing at poverty, not a guilty man trying to buy forgiveness, but a person who had lost something precious and was trying to find his way back to himself. She understood that impulse. She lived it every day. She reached out her hand and he took it, and they shook once, firmly, and she said, "Then we had better get started, because we only have 19 days left." They built the campaign in 4 days. Marcus called in every favor he had accumulated over 20 years in business, every connection and contact and colleague who owed him something, and he told them all the same thing: "This is not about me. This is not about Hartwell Industries. This is about a woman who gave her coat to a stranger in winter and whose daughter is dying and who needs your help." He arranged for a video crew to come to Sophia's apartment, and she sat on her small couch with Lily beside her and told her story in her own words. Without script or rehearsal, just the truth of who she was and what she faced and why she was asking strangers for help, even though every part of her had been raised to believe that asking was the same as begging. She spoke about Miguel and the accident and the years of working double shifts and the medical bills that piled up no matter how hard she tried. She spoke about Lily's heart and the surgery and the 3-week window that was closing day by day. And she spoke about the coat, the moment that had started everything. The morning she saw a young woman shivering in the lobby and did not think twice about giving away the only warm thing she owned. "I am not asking you to save us," she said to the camera. "I am asking you to help us save ourselves." The video went online the next morning, and by noon it had been viewed 50,000 times, and by evening it had crossed 500,000. The donations began as a trickle and became a stream and then a flood. They came from wealthy donors who wrote checks for $10,000, and they came from janitors and nurses and single mothers who sent $20 and apologized that it was not more. They came with notes that said, "I know what it is like to work and still not have enough." And they came with notes that said, "Your story reminded me of my mother." And they came with notes that said, "I saw the video and I cried and I had to do something." The young intern Sophia had given her coat to. A woman named Rebecca, who was now 3 months into her first job and still wore that gray coat every day, donated her entire first paycheck. She came to Sophia's apartment and handed her an envelope and said, "You saved me that morning. You do not even know how much you saved me. I was so lost and so scared, and you were the first person in this city who saw me as a human being." George, the security guard, organized a collection among the building staff and went floor to floor with a coffee can and came back with $600 in cash and coins and a list of names of everyone who had contributed. Mrs. Chen appeared at Sophia's door one evening with an envelope thick with bills and said, "This is from the janitors. We have been saving our tips for months. We were going to use it for a Christmas party, but this matters more." Sophia tried to refuse, and Mrs. Chen put the envelope in her hands and closed her fingers around it and said, "Do not question, Grace child. You taught me that, and now I am teaching it back to you." Marcus matched every donation personally, and he did it anonymously through a foundation account that bore no name. He did not attend the fundraising events. He did not speak to reporters. He did not put his face or his name on any piece of the campaign. When people asked him why he was not taking credit, he said, "This is her victory, not mine. I am just the one who made the phone calls." But the truth was more complicated than that. The truth was that he understood now what Catherine had tried to teach him all those years. That kindness, with a name attached, was just advertising that the measure of what you gave was not in the recognition you received, but in the change you created. He had spent 2 years writing checks to charities and attending galas and seeing his name in programs and feeling nothing, and now he was giving more than he had ever given and feeling everything, and he understood finally that this was what it meant to be alive. Lily became the heart of the campaign in ways no one had planned. She folded hundreds of origami hearts in her hospital bed while she waited for the surgery, her small fingers working the paper with practiced precision, and Sophia sent them to donors as thank-you gifts with handwritten notes that said, "This heart carries a wish from my daughter to you." The donors wrote back and said they were keeping the hearts on their desks and their refrigerators and their nightstands, and some of them said the hearts had made them cry, and some of them said the hearts had made them call their own children, and some of them said the hearts had reminded them of something they had forgotten about, what mattered in life. One afternoon, Marcus came to visit Lily in the hospital, and she looked at him with her serious dark eyes and said, "Mama says you have a good heart." And he said, "I am not sure that is true." And Lily shook her head and said, "She says it was just sleeping, and now it is waking up." Marcus did not know what to say to that. He stood by the bed of this 7-year-old girl who was dying and who spent her days folding paper wishes for strangers. And he felt something break open in his chest that had been closed for 2 years, and he understood that Lily was right. His heart had been sleeping. It had gone to sleep the day Catherine died, and it had stayed asleep through all the checks and the galas and the empty nights in his penthouse, and now it was waking up because a janitor had given away her coat, and a little girl believed that wishes could come true. The campaign reached its goal on the 14th day, $250,000. More than enough for the surgery and the hospital stay and the rehabilitation that would follow. Sophia sat at her kitchen table and looked at the number on the screen and could not quite make herself believe it was real. For 3 years she had worked and saved and sold everything she had, and it was never enough. And now in 2 weeks strangers had given her more than she could have earned in a decade. She did not know how to hold that. She did not know how to accept grace on that scale. But she thought about Mrs. Chen saying, "Do not question it," and she thought about Miguel saying, "We do not beg, we work." And she understood that this was not begging. This was community. This was people seeing each other across all the distances that usually kept them apart, and saying, "Yes, I will help you carry this because I know what it is to carry something too heavy alone." The surgery was scheduled for a Tuesday morning. Sophia spent the night before in Lily's hospital room, sitting in the chair beside the bed, watching her daughter sleep and trying not to think about all the things that could go wrong. The doctors had explained the risks. They had explained the procedure and the recovery time and the odds of success. The odds were good. They said 85%. But Sophia could not stop thinking about the other 15%, the shadow that hung over everything, the possibility that she would lose the only thing she had left of Miguel. She was sitting in the dark, holding Lily's hand when Marcus appeared in the doorway. He was not wearing a suit. He was dressed simply in slacks and a sweater, and he looked tired and uncertain, and he was holding something in his hand. He came into the room and sat down in the other chair and held out what he was carrying, and Sophia saw that it was one of Lily's origami hearts. "She told me to give this back to you," he said. "She said my wish came true, so now it is your turn to make one." Sophia took the paper heart and felt its familiar weight in her palm and looked at Marcus and said, "I spent so long being strong that I forgot how to let anyone in." And he said, "You let me in." And she said, "Yes, I did." and I am glad. She said Miguel would have liked you, and Marcus said I did not know him, but I know he would have been proud of you. They sat together through the long hours of the night, and they did not talk much, but the silence between them was not empty. It was the silence of two people who had seen each other truly and did not need words to fill the space. In the morning, the surgical team came for Lily. Sophia walked beside the gurney as far as they would let her, and then she kissed her daughter's forehead and said, "I love you, Mija, and I will be right here when you wake up." Lily smiled and said, "I know, Mama," and then the doors closed and she was gone. Sophia stood in the hallway and felt Marcus's hand on her shoulder and let him guide her to the waiting room where Mrs. Chen and George were already sitting. They waited. Minutes became hours, and the hours stretched out like years. Sophia clutched the origami heart in her hand and did not let go. She thought about Miguel and the accident, and the moment she had realized he was gone. She thought about the first time she held Lily as a baby and the promise she had made to protect her. She thought about the coat in the donation bin and the woman shivering in the lobby and the choice she had made without thinking, because it was the only choice she knew how to make. She thought about Marcus in his empty office, watching her on the security cameras and falling in love with something he could not name. She did not know what to call what existed between them. It was not romance. Not yet, maybe not ever. But it was something. It was a connection built on truth and work, and the willingness to see each other clearly. It was enough. The doors opened, and Dr. Hassan walked into the waiting room, and Sophia stood up so fast she nearly fell and searched the doctor's face for the answer to the only question that mattered. Dr. Hassan smiled. "She is going to be fine," she said. "Her heart is strong. The surgery was a complete success. She is in recovery and she is asking for you." Sophia felt her legs give way, and Marcus caught her, and she pressed her face against his chest and sobbed. She cried for Lily and for Miguel and for the 3 years of terror that were finally ending. She cried for the strangers who had saved her daughter, and for Mrs. Chen and George, who were crying too, and for Marcus, who was holding her, and whose own tears were falling into her hair. She had not let herself cry like this since the night Miguel died. She had been strong for so long, had held everything together through sheer force of will, and now she let it all go and felt herself emptied out and filled back up with something that might have been hope. 6 months later, on a warm Saturday morning in June, Sophia stood at the window of her new apartment and watched Lily playing in the courtyard below with 2 friends from school. Her daughter was running and laughing, and her cheeks were pink with health, and she moved with the careless energy of a child who had never known illness. Though, of course, she had known it. She bore the scar on her chest to prove it. But the scar was fading now, and so was the fear. Lily was going to be fine. She was going to grow up and go to school and make friends and fall in love and have children of her own someday. And Sophia was going to be there for all of it. The apartment was modest, but filled with light. Sophia had chosen it for the courtyard and the tree outside Lily's window and the way the morning sun came through the kitchen. It was not much larger than their old place, but it felt different. It felt like a beginning instead of a holding pattern. Sophia was not a janitor anymore. Marcus had funded a scholarship for her to finish her nursing degree, the dream she had put aside when she married Miguel, and she had graduated 3 months ago and now worked at St. Christopher's Hospital in the pediatric cardiac unit. She cared for children like Lily and families like hers, people who were terrified and overwhelmed and did not know how they would survive, and she sat with them and told them her story and showed them that survival was possible. It was the work she was meant to do. She had known it the moment she put on the scrubs and walked onto the floor and saw a mother sitting beside her sick child with that look of desperate love that Sophia knew so well. This was why she had gone through everything. This was the purpose that had been waiting for her on the other side. Marcus had changed, too. He had stepped back from the daily operations of Hartwell Industries and handed most of his responsibilities to his executive team. He spent his time now on the Catherine Hartwell Foundation, the organization he had created to fund surgeries for children whose families could not afford them. In its first 6 months, the foundation had helped 32 children and their families, and Marcus had visited every single one of them. He did not write checks from a distance anymore. He sat in hospital rooms and listened to parents tell their stories, and he made sure they knew they were not alone. Sophia sat on the board of the foundation, not as a token, not as a symbol, but as a leader. She had earned it. She reviewed applications and interviewed families, and made decisions about where the money would go. She brought to the work something Marcus could not bring: the knowledge of what it felt like to be on the other side, to be the one asking for help, to be the one whose child was dying. That knowledge was worth more than any check he could write. A knock came at the door, and Sophia opened it, and Marcus was standing there with a bottle of wine and a small wrapped package. He came for dinner once a week now, sometimes twice. He and Lily had developed their own relationship, something separate from his relationship with Sophia, and it involved origami lessons and terrible jokes and long conversations about things that 7-year-olds found important. Sophia did not know where any of this was going. She was not ready to know, but she was glad he was there. Lily came running in from the courtyard when she heard Marcus's voice, and she threw her arms around him and said, "I made you something," and he said, "You always make me something," and she said, "This one is special." She ran to her room and came back with an origami heart, larger than the others, made from red paper with gold edges. She put it in his hands and said, "This one is for keeps. You do not have to give it back or pass it on. This one is just for you." Marcus looked at the heart, and then at Lily, and then at Sophia, and his eyes were bright. "Thank you," he said. "I will keep it forever." Later that night, after Lily was asleep and the dishes were done, Sophia and Marcus sat on the small balcony and looked out at the city. The same city where they had met in an empty lobby, where she had given away her coat and he had watched on a security monitor, where a little girl had folded paper hearts and believed that wishes could come true. Sophia thought about everything that had brought them here: the accident that took Miguel, the illness that threatened Lily, the desperate years of work and fear, the lie Marcus had told, and the truth that had broken through it. All of it had led to this moment on this balcony, with this man who had started as a stranger and become something she did not yet have a word for. She thought about what Lily had said all those months ago, that Marcus had a good heart, but it was sleeping. She thought about her own heart and the walls she had built around it, and the way those walls had kept her alive, but also kept her alone. Maybe that was what healing looked like. Not the absence of wounds, but the willingness to let someone see them. Marcus reached over and took her hand, and they sat like that as the city lights glittered below them. Two people who had lost everything and found something unexpected in the wreckage, something that felt like family even though they shared no blood. Something that felt like home even though they had only just begun. And on Marcus's desk back in his office, beside the photograph of Catherine that he no longer kept turned to the wall, sat two things. The first was a new photograph of Sophia and Lily at the Foundation's inaugural gala, both of them laughing, Lily holding up one of her origami hearts for the camera. The second was the paper heart Lily had given him that night, the one that was just for him, the one that meant he had finally learned what Catherine tried to teach him and what Sophia had shown him without trying. That wealth was not what you had, but what you gave. That grace was not what you earned, but what you passed on. That the measure of a person was what they gave when they had nothing left, and also what they accepted when they could not save themselves. He had given, and he had accepted, and he had been changed by both, and that was enough. That was more than enough. That was everything.